Welcome back to the Retirement Fiduciary Podcast, your classroom for no BS financial education, a place where we have authentic discussions about retirement planning, investment management, tax reduction strategies, insurance, estate planning, and more. Here's your host, Adam Koos, President, Portfolio Manager, and Senior Financial Advisor at Libertas Wealth Management Group.
All right, everybody, before we get into it, let's get to our housekeeping items here. If this is your first time listening or watching, then thank you so much for joining us. I'm Adam Koos, President, Portfolio Manager, and Senior Financial Advisor at Libertas Wealth Management Group in Columbus, Ohio. Always remember to hit that subscribe button so that you're the first to get these episodes. So please be sure to link up on YouTube, Twitter, and Spotify. And again, you can subscribe and follow us on all three of those mediums. You can also follow me on Twitter at Adam Koos, as well as Instagram at Adam D. Koos. And of course, Koos is spelled Koos, absolutely nothing like it's pronounced, but just so you know if you're looking for me on Twitter, or X as they call it these days. If you'd like to schedule an intro call to confidentially discuss your financial situation in more detail, or if you'd like to get a second opinion on your retirement plan and or investment portfolio, please head over to our website at libertaswealth.com. Just click on that button that says click here to get started, and someone will reach out to you to get something on our calendar. Last but of course not least, all links, visuals, charts, and other educational resources are always available on our website, again at libertaswealth.com. And I've got a quick one here today on our first ever rebranded Retirement Fiduciary Podcast. Super excited about this, super excited about the new name. It pretty much speaks to exactly what we do here for our clients as true fee-only NAPFA registered fiduciaries, as we've been for more than a decade now. So, all right, we always like to start with a quote of the day, and today it's Warren Buffett, and he said, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." In other words, save first, pay yourself first, then worry about the spending later, but always pay yourself first. All right, let's jump into the meat of the conversation here. We're talking about the how it's not too late for New Year's resolutions and the top 10 New Year's resolutions that you should be thinking about when it comes to your finances, financial planning, retirement planning, and more. First and foremost, it's save more money. We're just going to start with saving. We need to set a specific goal. You need to start small. Sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming to think of big, huge numbers. So don't worry about hitting the big nut right off the bat. You want to start small with something you can commit to and saving regularly. And if it helps, you can use an ACH as opposed to sending checks, because sometimes people forget. And when I say ACH, that's just having money swept directly from your bank account to your savings account or to your investment account, brokerage account, Roth IRA, what have you. And to make it even easier, what you can do is, instead of just ACHing from your account, if you're worried about maybe overdrafting or accidentally spending too much money and then you get an overdraft because the money comes out of the account, what you can do is open up a separate account and then have your employer send part of your direct deposit that's earmarked for savings to that account only, and have the ACH come from that account, so you don't have to worry about ever getting an overdraft. It's just going to get in there, it's going to hit the account, then it's going to come right back out and go into your investment account. That's the first one. Second one, pay off debt. You have expenses. We know about that. But we have to tackle outstanding debt. We have to tackle the highest interest rate debt first. We get a lot of questions at our office about school loans, credit card debt, school loans that have been consolidated, private parent loans, mortgages. Should I pay off my mortgage or pay extra on my mortgage? If you have credit card debt or other revolving debt, the last thing you should be doing is trying to pay off or pay down your mortgage. You need to get rid of that higher interest revolving debt, credit card debt, things of that nature. And then once you've paid that off, then we can talk about, what's next. Do we have school loans? Well, it depends on the interest rate. We want to hit the highest interest rates first. But if you have interest rates, if you're one of these lucky people that have interest rates going all the way back to 2, 3, 4 years ago, you might have school loans with 2.75% interest. Same thing with your mortgage. You might be paying 3% on your mortgage. And with debt that cheap, it doesn't always make sense to pay down cheap debt when you could be making more in other places. It's just a break-even analysis there. Next one, number 3, we have to create a budget. Don't make a budget, though. This is my recommendation. I instead think you should start by creating an expense sheet and writing down what you already spend. The further back you go, the better, but you can start with 1 month. You can then go back to 3 months. And if you really want to do it well, go back a full 12 months. You can look at your credit card statements, bank statements, write everything down. You can usually export those to spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets from your banking and credit card institutions, And from there, you can organize everything in a way that makes it easy to see what you're spending. Because where it gets really eye-opening is looking back at what you're already spending and then saying, whoa, I didn't realize my money was going there. Because so many people don't really live by balancing their checkbook and paying that close of attention. They just swipe the card, whether it's a credit card or a debit card, and they just keep on going. So a lot gets wasted there. You'll find expenses that you didn't even know you were still spending. Subscriptions to things you don't even use anymore. So don't make a budget. Instead, write down what you spend, make that your expense sheet, and then start looking at creating a ways that you can reduce your expenses or perhaps even eliminate some. Next one, invest for the future. Now we're getting into investing. So first and foremost, I'm going to beat this whole thing to death, but first and foremost, get a financial plan. It doesn't matter if you're young. First and foremost, some people think, oh, well, I'm too young for that. I'm not, I barely have any money right now. And it's like, but the earlier you save, the less you have to save. Time is way more powerful than money itself. So by starting earlier, you can save so much less, but have so much more later in life because you started early. If you're older, if you're somebody in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and you feel like you're behind, if you're worried you might not be able to retire, if you're not so sure about your cash flow and what things are going to look like when you retire, you have to have a retirement plan, and not just something you whip up online, but a full-blown, comprehensive, written financial retirement plan, estate plan, tax plan, insurance plan, covering all the bases. And once you're there, again, even if you feel behind, get the plan done, and at least you'll know where you need to be. The longer you wait, the harder it is to make up for the lost time. And we're back to time again. But anyway, once we have that plan in place, we can back into the math. We can work on hitting long-term goals. But you have to have a financial plan. It's crucial. All right, next one, emergency fund. I'm kind of going in random order here, but emergency fund is one of the most crucial things you need to have. And it's one of the biggest reasons that young people get in debt. It's because they don't have an emergency fund. So when an emergency does happen, whether it's the HVAC system's breaking, the car breaks down and has a problem, whatever the emergency is, it has to go on a credit card. Now you're paying the credit card for the expense you couldn't afford, plus 17, 18, 20% interest, which means it's harder to get caught back up. Instead, the first thing you should do is create basically a high interest-bearing money market account, something like Capital One 360's Performance Savings. There's some promotional things going on at banks right now where you can get upwards of 4% on just money sitting in the bank. That was unheard of 2 years ago. So what you do is if you're single or if you're a couple and only one of you work, then what you want is you want to have about 6 months worth of your expenses. So whatever you spend every month, you want to have about 6 months of expenses in an emergency account. If you're married or you're a couple and both of you work, then 3 months is usually sufficient. So you can do 3 months. And then if you're retired, then 12 months makes a lot of sense if you want to be really conservative. But some people stick to 6 months, and then they might put the other 6 months worth in a brokerage account that's liquid, that's invested, working harder for them long term. But if they ever needed to access that money, there's no penalties and there's no taxes outside of the growth on the investments that would be sold, and taxes would, of course, be owed on that. So that's the emergency fund. Next here is cutting unnecessary expenses. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but think about some of these questions. First of all, how much, and I'm just picking these out of the blue, by the way. Well, let's just start with Starbucks. I don't mean to pick on Starbucks, but how much do you spend going to Starbucks every day? If you're not a Starbucks person, if you just loathe them as a company, how much do you spend going to Tim Hortons? How much do you spend every month going to Dunkin' Donuts? Whatever your coffee or vice of choice is. How many times do you go out to eat instead of packing or just eating at home? And food these days, talk about inflation. One of the only things left that are really highly inflated is food costs, and that's partially due to energy costs. But food is so expensive. These days when you go out to eat, not only is the food more expensive, but when you sit down and you have a server, hopefully you're taking care of that server. And when it used to be commonplace to get a 15% tip, now it's commonplace to get a 20% tip, sometimes even higher if you get really, really good service. So going out to eat for 4 people at a modest Mexican restaurant, I'm speaking from experience here, can cost upwards of $150. That's crazy. I'm not saying never go out to eat. What I'm saying is if you're worried about your savings, retirement, if you're worried, if you feel behind, if you feel like you're not being responsible or as responsible as you should be with your money, then analyze those expenses, cut the unnecessary ones, or at least reduce them. And then, if you're serious, well, it's time to get serious, right? Next one here, improve your credit score. Now, this is a little tough to do, but you got to pay all your bills on time. Never, ever, ever pay anything late. That's first thing. Second, don't have a million different cards. One of the things you can do, and by the way, this is going to hurt your credit score a little bit in the short term, but one of the things you can do is you can get your credit score pulled for free. You can use like freecreditreport.com, and you can look at your credit report and find these old credit cards you didn't even know you had anymore. Now, for all these little tiny ones that are out there, you probably want to cancel a bunch of them. And what you want to do is you want to have 2, 3 or so. I mean, you can have more than that if you use them regularly, but you can have 2 or 3 or more, but basically some big ones that you use regularly that have bigger balances on them. Not balances, but bigger available credit. You don't want big balances, especially if you don't pay them off every month. But that's the first thing. So, cut all those credit cards out, cancel them, send the letters, do it through email, online, whatever, and get down to call it like a building blocks, in a sense, group of credit cards that you use regularly. From there, never, ever cancel your oldest credit card. You want to always keep that oldest one because credit history is important. So, for instance, I have an old credit card. It goes all the way back to 2001 or something like that. But it was one of my first, actually probably earlier than that, probably 1999. But it was one of my first credit cards I opened in college. I haven't used it in, 15, 18 years. But it's got a zero balance and it's just hanging out there because it's my oldest card, and it gives me a really, really long credit history, which is also good. But over time, as you pay things on time, as you pay off your credit cards every month, as you reduce the amount of cards you have, but keep your balances low relative to your available credit and have a long credit history, what you can do is see your credit score go up and up and up over time. And it can happen quickly. Next, plan for retirement. We can't forget this one, right? It's what we do here at Libertas Wealth Management Group is retirement planning, investment management. So back to that plan again. You need to contribute at minimum the amount of your employer match if you get a match and if you have a retirement plan at work. Some people have pensions. If you have a pension, usually you don't get a retirement plan with a match. That's just kind of how it works. But if you have a retirement plan at work and it has a match, you got to take advantage of that match first and foremost. That is, if you want to retire someday and you want to remotely have something that resembles the lifestyle that you have today. So that's first thing. Second, you're going to have to save probably a lot more. Even those with pensions need a plan to optimize whether or not to take a full life annuity, a survivorship benefit for a spouse. There's partial lump sum options that can make sense for a lot of people. In fact, when you're good at saving and you've done well for yourself and you're closing in retirement, oftentimes the partial lump sum options make a ton of sense relative to just taking a big income stream and letting the institution in question, say the pension institution, have all your money, and then you just wait for the check and hope that they never go belly up. So that's really important. But bottom line, again, back to that retirement plan, what if analyses, making sure that we have down when are we going to quit working? When do we want to make work optional? We want to know what are we going to do in retirement? How often are we going to buy vehicles net after trade-in, and how often are we going to buy those vehicles, replace vehicles? How often are we going to go on big vacations, big international vacations? What about taking the family on a trip maybe once every other year? How often are we going to do maybe domestic travel? What about long weekend road trips? Do we want to snowbird in the winter? Maybe spend 1, 2, 3 months in a warmer place if we live in the north. If you're in the south, then whatever, I don't know where you guys go. You probably don't go anywhere because you already live in paradise, but I digress. So, plan for retirement, huge, obviously. Number 9 is educate yourself financially. Shameless plug, wait for it. You're already doing it. You're listening to or watching this podcast. Our articles, podcasts, screencasts, the things that we put out, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I think they're pretty good. I think they're good because we love what we do here. I always say I haven't worked in 22 years. It's been fun the whole time. So this is a good start. I think subscribing, if you go to libertaswealth.com, you can subscribe to get on our list. You'll get all those notifications whenever we have screencast articles and podcast sent out. Obviously, you can subscribe for this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, on YouTube, Spotify, where else? iTunes, that's right. But anyway, that's a good start. Then find books, books that kind of speak to you, that speak to your situation, and read those books. If you don't like reading books, then listen to them. That's all I do. I don't read at all because I cannot pay attention to words on paper for some reason. But I'm really, really good at listening to books. I also use Blinkist. If you've never heard of Blinkist, basically it's like the Cliffs Notes versions for those of us who are over 40 years of age. For those of you under 40, Cliffs Notes are basically summarizations. Is that a word? Summarized books. It's like taking a 400-page book and it turns it into I'm going to translate into audiobook level. So it might take a 400-page book or a book that takes maybe 12 hours to listen to, and it's going to turn it into something that's going to take you 20 minutes to listen to. Or if I translated that into pages, maybe it's only 20 pages long or something like that. So check out Blinkist. But a book recommendation for everybody who wants to understand a little bit more about the economy and the markets is a book called How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. It's actually written for fifth graders, and it's awesome for adults. Whether you're listening to it or reading it, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes, awesome book. Everybody should read that thing. It'll open your mind, I promise. Number 10, last but not least, got to babysit that plan. We've talked about the plan 3 times now, so I hope I'm driving through how important a financial plan is, how crucial a financial plan is, how instrumental it is to your success, to having the ability to quit someday and live a stress-free life after work. You have to meet with a professional financial advisor if you want one of these, unless you can do it on your own. There are ways to do it on your own online, and I'm not saying you can't do that. The only thing I will say is if you're going to do it yourself to save money, totally fine. You just have to have the interest and the time. And the problem we find oftentimes is that people don't have the interest, so they don't spend the time on it. Or what we find is they have the interest, but they're just too busy, and they just never get around to it. So we end up with the same result at the end of the day. So if you can do it on your own, awesome. Go ahead and do it on your own. Save the money, and you'll end up making more money because you didn't pay anybody. Great. But if you aren't somebody who wants to do it all on your own, if you're not somebody who likes researching the markets and tinkering with financial plans and Monte Carlo analyses, then that's what we're here for, or companies like ours. You go to napfa.org, that's NAPFA, the National Association for Personal Financial Advisors, napfa.org. Type in your zip code. You'll find a fee-only, true NAPFA-affiliated fiduciary near you. These are the real fiduciaries that are out there. There's not a lot of them, but you'll want to find a fiduciary. If you do that, you've already done 90% of the research to find the right firm for you. From there, it's just interviewing financial advisors that work at these firms and finding out if they're a good fit personality-wise for you, and if their services make sense, if what they're providing makes sense for you. But you want comprehensive planning, of course. So not only do you want to make that plan, though, and if you have a plan, you probably want a second opinion on that plan from a fiduciary, but you want to babysit that plan. Give it market fluctuations over time. Markets go up, markets go down. You want to make sure you're saving enough over time. Things change with salaries go up. We get raises, job changes, things of that nature. Goals change. Maybe you want to retire earlier than you originally thought. Maybe, like I mentioned, snowbirding earlier. Maybe you have some new goals. Like, you know what? I thought I was just going to do vacations, but I think I wanted snowbird as well. I think I want to spend some time in a warm place. Or I thought I wanted a snowbird, but actually, you know what? I'd really like to buy and own a vacation home someplace warm where it's my home. Maybe I Airbnb or VRBO it when I'm not staying there. So anyway, things change. Bottom line, you don't want to plant a tree and walk away from it, right? You gotta baby that tree, take care of it, water it, because anything can happen. So it's a partnership. So at the end of the day here, 10 New Year's resolutions in February, because it's never too late to start paying attention to this stuff. And I think I'm going to go ahead and close out here. So I hope I didn't do too terribly when it came to the timing. But that's it for today's show. Feel free to share this episode with your friends and family. And if you'd like to discuss your personal situation further, remember, you never, ever have to be a client to ask a question. As mentioned earlier, if you'd like to set up an introduction call to discuss your financial situation, or if you'd like to get a second opinion on your retirement plan, head over to our website at libertaswealth.com and click on the button that says click here to get started, and someone will reach out to you to get an intro call and schedule on the calendar at minimum. Be sure again to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and remember, you can always sign up at libertaswealth.com as well to not only get these updates, but you'll also get access to the screencast, videos, articles, and other material we send out to our clients delivered as soon as they're released directly to your email inbox. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter, or the X as they call it these days, at Adam Koos, as well as Instagram at Adam D. Koos. And as I always say, there's thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to give ours a listen today. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Retirement Fiduciary Podcast. To see any charts or images that were mentioned on this show, to check out additional articles, videos, and other educational resources, or to set up an intro call with your host, Adam Koos, just head over to libertaswealth.com. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. None of our shows engage in rendering legal, financial, tax, or other professional services. Always talk to a certified financial planner or fee-only fiduciary financial advisor before implementing any of the ideas shared in this episode.